Hello, friends. My name is Gloria Lariva, and I send you greetings on behalf of my comrades in the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Although I was designated to attend, I unfortunately got COVID and just became negative, so I could not risk getting other people sick or traveling, and for that I apologize. These are indeed serious and challenging times with the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the U.S. imperialists determined to continue fueling the war with tens of billions of dollars in weapons. It's incredible to hear the U.S. officials say that they will continue training, doubling the training of Ukrainian soldiers for several years, and there's even talk of sending Patriot missiles, which everyone knows would be a huge escalation. But it shows that the war is not about protecting Ukraine, nor defending democracy. In trying to bring down Russia, Washington is effectively destroying Ukraine, the people, and its infrastructure, and any hope of recovery. But in pulling back our view to the rest of the world, we can see that the U.S. is also focusing its guns and warships, literally, on the People's Republic of China. Today, it is Taiwan that they're trying to use as a staging ground against the PRC. Before, it was Xinjiang and the Uyghur separatists. Before that, it was Hong Kong. Before that, it was Tibet. Washington is terrified of China's economic prowess and its influence for development in the world. Instead of the U.S. competing with badly needed infrastructure development in the United States, which could create millions of jobs, the U.S. instead chooses to wage economic war with brutal sanctions, crippling sanctions, unilateral measures against anyone who stands up to the United States. Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Iran, Syria, the DPRK, Russia, China. In fact, who doesn't the U.S. sanction? While the PSL was critical of Russia's intervention in Ukraine in February, in the lead-up to the war, we exposed and denounced the U.S. and Europe's machinations, the incessant expansion of NATO, and we agree that Russia felt a well-founded existential threat. In the early weeks of February and March, when the U.S. media was whipping up hysteria against Russia, and when it was actually pushing for a no-fly zone, which would have led to direct U.S. and NATO war with Russia, we issued a brochure, a statement in English and Spanish to appeal to the U.S. public saying why we should oppose a no-fly zone, with the history of the lead-up to the war and the demands of abolishing NATO. Across the U.S., we went into the streets, distributing tens of thousands of brochures to reach the people, even as hysterical as the situation was in the early months. And we have consistently used our media, both our website and social media, to argue for NATO's abolition, for an end of the U.S. sanctions, to the end of this war. We're also part of a national initiative with prominent anti-imperialist and peace organizations and individuals. We took part in a November 19 initiative launched in New York City with the Answer Coalition and Director Brian Becker, with Claudia de la Cruz and Manolo de los Santos of the People's Forum, with Noam Chomsky, Code Pink's Medea Benjamin, with Vijay Prashad, and many others to say that the road to real peace is negotiations and no expansion of NATO. So we're holding a rally on Saturday, January 14, in Times Square, New York City. With the outbreak of the war, some organizations have equated the U.S., NATO, and Russia as imperialist. We do not agree that Russia is imperialist, nor do we see an equal sign between the U.S. and Russia. Russia's involvement in Ukraine was a result of the U.S. insisting that Ukraine's entry to NATO was non-negotiable. It was a result of the fascist coup in 2014 and the growing denial of rights for the Russian nationality, not just language rights. And the people of Donetsk and Lugansk kept asking Russia for protection in the face of Ukraine's bombardment, which had caused the deaths of 14,000 people. A red line was drawn, and it was the U.S. that crossed it. We lay the blame for the conflict squarely on U.S. shoulders, and we call for real, substantive negotiations. The Biden administration and the neoconservatives in the government, Blinken, Jake Sullivan, and Biden himself, are determined to win the war against Russia, but Russia is determined not to lose the war. By the way, I was in Yugoslavia twice during the U.S.-NATO bombing war, for a total of 10 days in 1999. I first went there with Ramsey Clark on the 5th day of the bombing for several days, and on the 55th day of the bombing, again with Ramsey Clark. I produced the documentary NATO Targets Yugoslavia. The U.S. used depleted uranium and more than 1 million cluster munitions, many that still remain unexploded. They are ticking time bombs. In my travels, I saw people who had just died in hospital. Cluster bombs paralyzing young people. I saw a rescuer with his legs blown off. And I saw an absolute war of aggression. In 78 days of bombing, 600,000 workers lost their job because the state-run factories were destroyed by those targeted bombs. I also saw the tremendous resistance of the people, holding concerts on the bridges, wearing targets on their back in defiance. But piece by piece, the former Yugoslavia has become part of NATO, except for Serbia. I salute the resistance of the courageous people of Yugoslavia during that war. They were not defeated. They were forced to surrender by the betrayal of other parties. And it saddens me greatly that the great experiment in socialism and unity of those nationalities became a target of the U.S. and NATO. And the people of Europe are also paying a price. The European leaders of Britain, Germany, France, Poland, Romania, and others may not be entirely happy with having to carry Washington's water and to be near the front lines, but they're also responsible, while the people suffer. And we are encouraged to see the demonstrations in Europe, not only for peace, but also denouncing NATO and the profiteering of companies like the energy corporations, who must always make a profit, especially in times of crisis. In the United States, millions of people are facing eviction. 40 million people without health care. Millions of people in poverty that's growing and growing. People who are feeling no hope, and all they see is a government that has no debate when it comes to selling weapons for war. But the struggle is rising, sisters and brothers. It's rising among workers who are organizing unions, from Starbucks to Amazon to graduate workers here in California. And you can be sure that we will continue the struggle here to say no to NATO, no to U.S. imperialism, and yes to solidarity of the peoples of the world. I wish I could be there with you all, and I wish you all great success in your deliberations and struggle for peace with justice. Thank you.